The map has no title, no date, no signature, no official seal from any colonial authority, any church commission, or any naval record. What it has is a bay, drawn in rough ink strokes, with a creek running down from the hills and a mark that has been copied, recopied, passed from one set of hands to another across 200 years, each copy carrying a new expedition to the same bay, the same creek, the same wall of jungle, the same answer: nothing. Something is missing on this island, something no one can see or find. 300 ships followed it. None of them returned with what it had pointed to. 300 expeditions, 2 centuries, an island 550 kilometers off the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, so remote that the nearest coastline requires 3 days of open ocean crossing in good weather. On most days, the only movement visible from shore is the rain. This island receives more than 7 meters of annual rainfall. The jungle grows back over anything cut into it within a single season. The rock is steep and unstable. The streams that drain the interior number in the dozens. The crews arrived anyway. Fishermen and treasure hunters in the 1830s. A German colonist in 1889 who stayed for 19 years. Malcolm Campbell, the British land speed record holder, who financed an expedition in the 1920s. Franklin Roosevelt, a sitting president of the United States, who came during his presidency in 3 separate visits, officially on fishing trips. Errol Flynn, Bugsy Siegel, a direct descendant of the man who supposedly buried the gold in the first place. Not one of them found what the map pointed to. And some historians now believe there was never anything there to find. The island has been known to European navigators since 1526, when a Spanish sailor named Juan de Cabezas became the first recorded European to document its position. 1535, chronicled by historian Gonzalo Fernandez de Oviedo y Valdez, places the discovery in that year, referenced in his Historia General y Natural de las Indias. What those early accounts confirm is that the island was useful in the way that mattered most to 16th century sailors crossing the Pacific: fresh water, abundant wildlife, and protected anchorage on its northern shore. The name Isla del Coco, or Cocos Island, most likely derives from the coconut trees that once lined its beaches. The island covers roughly 24 square kilometers of volcanic rock, sitting atop the Cocos tectonic plate. Its highest point reaches 575 meters above sea level. Its coastline is mostly cliffs, interrupted by 4 accessible bays. It is the only island in the eastern Pacific with a true tropical rainforest. For the Spanish and British traders who crossed this ocean in the 17th and 18th centuries, Cocos was a way station, a place to refill water casks, repair rigging, and take on provisions after weeks of open Pacific. The island appears in period nautical charts and whaling logbooks, its northern bays listed as reliable stopping points. Pirates and privateers operating in Pacific waters knew it equally well. The jungle provided cover. The isolation meant that patrol vessels rarely extended their routes this far from any coastal port. Several pirate captains are linked to the island by maritime records of the era. Edward Davis arrived on the Bachelor's Delight in 1685, documented in records maintained by the conservation organization Amigos de la Isla del Coco. Benito Bonito, a privateer operating along the Pacific coast around 1818, appears in multiple accounts in connection with the island, though the specific details of what he may have buried there are inconsistent across different sources and do not appear in any primary colonial document. A crew member named Mary Welch, transported to an Australian penal colony and later released, led an expedition back to the island using compass bearings she claimed to have memorized. She arrived to find the landmarks gone, altered by decades of tropical growth and erosion. None of this made Cocos Island famous. What made it famous was a story that began in Lima in 1820 and may never have left Lima at all. The city of Lima, capital of the Spanish Viceroyalty in South America, was under pressure that had been building for a decade. Revolutionary forces under José de San Martín were advancing from the south. The Spanish colonial administration held an accumulation of wealth that had taken 3 centuries to assemble. Gold and silver from the Andean mines, ecclesiastical objects from Lima's churches and cathedrals, 300 years of donated and confiscated religious material from across the colonial territory. San Martin's liberating expedition had reached the outskirts of the city by mid-1220. Lima was evacuating. The administrative machinery of the Viceroyalty, 2 centuries old, built on the extracted wealth of an entire continent, was dissolving in a matter of weeks. What happened to the church's accumulated gold in those weeks is, in the colonial archive, largely a blank. According to the legend, the Viceroy of Lima, José de la Serna, made a decision. The treasure would be moved. A British merchant captain named William Thompson, commander of a vessel called the Mary Dear, was commissioned to transport it to safety in Mexico until the situation resolved. What the cargo allegedly contained has been described in documents of uncertain provenance. One inventory, referenced in accounts held in a museum in Caracas, Venezuela, lists golden religious statues, chests of coins, jeweled altar pieces, and 2 life-sized figures of the Virgin Mary cast in solid gold. Among the described items, one statue reportedly weighing close to 780 pounds, adorned with 1,684 precious stones. Estimates of the treasure's total contemporary value have ranged from $200 million to $1 billion. These numbers appear in accounts of the legend. They do not appear in any confirmed Spanish colonial archive. The Mary Dear departed Callao, the port of Lima, in late 1820. According to the story, once the ship was far enough from shore, Thompson's crew acted. The Spanish soldiers and priests aboard the vessel did not return to Lima. The Mary Dear changed course entirely, not toward Mexico but north, toward an island Thompson knew from previous Pacific crossings. Cocos Island. The crew spent time ashore. The cargo was buried at multiple locations across the island's interior using natural landmarks. Creek confluences, rock formations, a particular cave entrance as markers. Then the Mary Dear departed the island. She was intercepted. A Spanish naval vessel caught the Mary Dear somewhere in the Pacific. The crew was taken into custody and tried for piracy. Research conducted in the early 20th century by British investigator Major de Montmorency, who searched the National Library of Lima, found references to 17 crew members placed on trial, a number that appears in multiple independent accounts. All but 2 faced the tribunal's full sentence. The exceptions were Thompson and his first mate, James Alexander Forbes. They were kept alive to lead the Spanish back to the gold. The Spanish brought both men to Cocos Island. They went ashore, and then Thompson and Forbes, who knew the island's interior well enough to use it, disappeared into the jungle. The Spanish searched for 3 weeks. They found neither man. They found no gold. Thompson eventually surfaced in Newfoundland, reportedly rescued by a passing whaler and presenting himself as a shipwreck survivor. Forbes made it to California, where historical records confirm a man of that name operating as a businessman in subsequent decades. James Alexander Forbes. I had arrived in South America at the age of 12 and was serving as the Mary Dear's first mate at 17. A detail consistent with Scottish maritime family records, and one that appears across multiple independent accounts of the legend. He became a businessman in California and, by all documented evidence, never spoke publicly about Cocos Island. The treasure, if it existed, was the thing his silence protected and his death preserved. Thompson died in the 1840s without returning to the island. Forbes reportedly passed a map and the broad outlines of the story to his family. He did not go back himself. One 1949 newspaper article in the Bakersfield Californian described James Forbes IV, a descendant, undertaking 5 separate expeditions to Cocos Island, one of which included 50 crew members and film equipment. On one visit, Forbes reported finding canvas fragments on the island's coast that he believed might be remnants of the Mary Dear's sails. He found nothing that could be confirmed as the treasure. John Keating, described in later accounts as a close friend of Thompson who received a map from him before his death, made the voyage to Cocos in 1844. He reportedly found a small cache, gold pieces, some jewelry, not the main hoard. His account, published after his death, became the founding document of what followed. 150 years of expeditions, each one carrying a version of his directions, each one arriving at the same bays and leaving with the same answer. Keating describes specific landmarks. Subsequent seekers arrived on the island and found those landmarks exactly where he said they would be. The creek, the cave entrance, the rock formation near the bay, each one led to a dead end. The expeditions that followed Keating arrived with versions of the same document, recopied, adjusted, annotated in the margins by whoever had held it before. Each copy introduced new small errors. Each error sent searchers to a slightly different location. By the time August Gissler arrived in 1889, at least a dozen expeditions had visited the island on the strength of Keating's account alone. None had come back with anything substantial. Each failure was attributed not to the maps being wrong, but to having read them incorrectly, which preserved the legend for the next expedition and the next set of investors. By the time Gissler prepared his expedition, the Lima treasure was not the only story the island had accumulated. At least 3 separate treasure traditions had attached themselves to Cocos Island's name by the mid-19th century. The first concerned Edward Davis and his bachelors, a cache of silver taken from Spanish galleons along the Pacific coast, reportedly buried on the island in 1685. The second was Benito Bonito's gold, said to have been buried in multiple consignments before his capture. The third was the Devonshire treasure, named for the ship whose crew member Mary Welch claimed to have witnessed the burial of gold bars on the island before being transported to a penal colony. Each tradition had its own set of clues, its own set of failed expeditions, and its own proponents who believed the others were searching in the wrong place. By the time Gissler arrived in 1889, the island had already been seriously searched by multiple parties. None had found anything substantial. Each failure, however, was attributed not to the absence of treasure but to searching the wrong coordinates, which meant that each failure left the legend intact and the next expedition theoretically possible. August Gissler arrived in 1889. He was 32 years old. He had spent years in preparation. 2 maps from entirely independent sources, both pointing to the same location on Cocos Island's northern coast. He had cross-referenced the accounts. He had studied the terrain from every document he could locate in Europe. He had spoken with people who claimed knowledge of the island's interior. He was absolutely certain He would be wrong for 19 years. The Costa Rican government, impressed by the thoroughness of his organization, did something that had no precedent. In 1897, 8 years into his stay, they appointed Gissler the island's first official governor, a title that has never been held by anyone else before or since. They also permitted him to establish a colony of German settlers, primarily tobacco farmers, who arrived and began working the island's accessible northern slopes. The colony lasted less than a decade. The rainfall was relentless. The isolation wore at the settlers' resolve. One by one, the farming families departed. By the early 1900s, Gissler and his wife were the only people on the island. The Cocos Plantation Company, the investment vehicle created to fund the search, had run dry. He kept digging. The island's conditions were consistent, more than 7 meters of rain annually. The jungle growing back over any cleared ground within a single growing season. The interior streams flooding after each rainfall. The terrain steep enough to make sustained excavation a physical argument with the ground itself. Gissler worked systematically through these conditions. He marked each site he'd excavated and adjusted his reading of the maps as he went. The tunnels he cut were carved through volcanic rock rather than packed earth, which is why some of them are still accessible today. A century and a quarter after he cut them, he excavated over 200 sites across 2 decades of searching. By the mid-1900s, he had covered most of the northern coast and significant portions of the island's interior. He had 2 independent maps pointing to the same spot. In 1908, August Gissler left Cocos Island for New York. He was 51 years old. In nearly 20 years of digging, he had found 6 gold coins. 6. For 2 centuries, every expedition log called this a confirmed theft. The archive in Lima calls it something else entirely. Nothing. Here is the problem that historians have been noting for decades. The Treasure of Lima is one of the most documented legends in the history of maritime exploration. It has inspired hundreds of books, multiple documentary films, and maintains an archive of accounts stretching from the mid-19th century to the present day. But the Spanish colonial records in Lima, the administrative documentation of the Viceroyalty, the institution that would have authorized and logged any large-scale removal of assets from the city in 1820, contain no confirmed record of a ship named Mary Dear departing from the port of Callao. No cargo manifest, no departure log, no record of a treasure assembled for emergency transport in the months before San Martin's forces entered the city. Some historians have argued that absence of documentation was intentional, that a covert operation during a time of revolutionary crisis would not have been publicly recorded. Others point to the general disorder of the period as an explanation. The counterargument is precise. The Spanish administered their colonies through a bureaucratic structure of considerable thoroughness. Port records from Callao covering the years 1815 to 1825 exist. They list ships, cargo, fees, and departure dates with consistency. The Lima archive covers hundreds of pages of colonial shipping records from the years around 1820. The records include emergency transactions conducted under far less secure circumstances than a treasure shipment would require. Captains who never arrived at their destinations are listed. Cargo diverted in revolutionary chaos is documented. Customs officials who fled the city before San Martin's forces arrived still submitted their final reports. The Mary Dear appears in none of them. The 1820 port records at Callao list vessels departing in the months before San Martin's forces reached Lima. Each entry carries a registered captain, a declared cargo, and a destination port. 3 of those vessels deviated from their declared routes. All 3 are documented, their captains identified, their cargo traced through subsequent records. None of the 3 was named the Mary Deer. None of them appeared off the coast of Costa Rica. What Major de Montmorency found in the National Library of Lima, references to 17 crew members tried for piracy, is suggestive but incomplete. The specific ship, the specific cargo, and the chain of events connecting them to Cocos Island have never been established by any document written before the legend began appearing in print. The first newspaper account of what would become the Lima treasure appeared in an American publication in 1855, citing a letter from San Francisco, and described it not as the Lima treasure at all, but as gold from a captured Spanish galleon buried on Cocos Island by pirates. The version most people know today, the Viceroy, the life-sized golden statue, the Mary Deer, did not solidify in print until an American newspaper published that account in 1929. That is 109 years after the events it describes. The island was a genuine pirate way station. Coins had been found there. The legend attracted investment that funded the very expeditions which consistently failed to disprove it. The story became self-sustaining not because it was verified, but because it was never conclusively refuted, and an island that produces no answer continues to produce expeditions. Some researchers have proposed that the treasure was real, but was never on Cocos Island at all. That navigational inconsistencies in 19th century accounts combined with imprecise longitude calculations of the era may have shifted the described burial location by hundreds of miles. The Tuamotu archipelago in French Polynesia has been named as a possible alternative in more than one analysis. No confirmed evidence has been found there either. Everything so far has an explanation. A man, a map, a failure. What comes next is the part the treasure story has been covering for 2 centuries. There is an event in Cocos Island's recorded history that the treasure narrative has consistently absorbed or bypassed. October 1863. A ship named the Adelante arrived at Chatham Bay. It was not looking for gold. Its captain, a man named Escura, had been contracted to transport 426 Tongan men and women from Peru back to their home islands. They were former captives of what historians call blackbirding, a practice in which Pacific Islanders were captured and transported to work in Peru's Guano Islands, then technically freed when diplomatic pressure forced a halt to the trade. Escura had been paid $30 per person to return them. He did not return them. The Adelante put all 426 people ashore on Cocos Island, far off any route back to Tonga, on an island with no infrastructure, no medical supplies, no shelter beyond what could be cut from jungle, and sailed away. The stated reason was that the passengers posed a disease risk to the crew. The whaler Active passed through Chatham Bay in late October and found approximately 200 people still surviving on shore. A Peruvian warship, the Tums, arrived in November. By then, 38 people remained. 388 people had not survived the month. The island that treasure hunters described for 200 years as remote and impenetrable, the very qualities meant to protect a buried fortune from discovery, were those same qualities working against nearly 400 human beings with nowhere to go and no ship returning. 38 survivors were taken to Paita on the Peruvian coast. What became of them afterward is incompletely recorded in the historical archive. There is no monument on Cocos Island to the 1863 event. Gissler's tunnels are accessible and occasionally entered by park rangers monitoring the island's interior. The bays where treasure hunters anchored for 2 centuries are named and mapped in Costa Rican park records. In any popular account of this island, the name Cocos Island means one thing. Not 1863. The Tums left Cocos Island in November 1863, carrying 38 people. The next vessel to anchor in Chatham Bay for any extended purpose arrived in the 1870s, and it was looking for gold. The island absorbed 1863 the way it absorbed everything else, without a record, without a marker, without a monument. The gold seeking continued regardless. After Gissler left in 1908, the island attracted seekers with more capital and less time than he had been able to spend. Malcolm Campbell arrived in the 1920s at the height of his fame as a land speed record holder. He financed an expedition, equipped his team with the best available technology for digging and subsurface exploration, and returned to Britain with nothing. Frank Worsley, the navigator who had guided Ernest Shackleton's lifeboat through some of the most dangerous seas on Earth during the 1914 to 1916 Endurance expedition, came to Cocos Island in the 1930s. He applied the same systematic precision to the island's terrain that he had applied to open ocean navigation in the Southern Ocean. Nothing. Worsley's failure is worth noting not because he failed. 300 expeditions failed, but because of who he was. He had navigated 800 miles of the world's most hostile ocean in an open boat, using a handheld sextant in breaking seas, and made land exactly where he intended. So if the coordinates in the maps had any accuracy at all, Worsley was the person most likely to find what they pointed to. He found the same thing everyone else had found. Franklin Roosevelt made 3 visits to the island during his presidency. Officially on fishing trips aboard the USS Houston, he asked questions about the interior, spoke with crew members familiar with the island's history, and spent time at the base. In recognition of the presidential visits, Costa Rica named an endemic palm tree after him, Rooseveltia frankliniana, the only documented thing Roosevelt acquired from the island. Errol Flynn, the Australian-born film actor at the height of his Hollywood career in the 1930s and 1940s, organized multiple visits to the island during this period. Flynn was a serious sailor with his own vessel, and the kind of restless energy the island seemed to attract in that era. Like everyone else who came, he found it dense, wet, and unresponsive. He described it in his autobiography as one of the places he had been drawn to without understanding why. Bugsy Siegel organized an expedition during the 1930s. The details are not well preserved in the historical record. What is confirmed is that he came, that he left, and that the island returned the same answer it returned to everyone else. By the mid-20th century, the Costa Rican government had begun restricting access. Treasure hunting was formally prohibited in the 1990s to protect an ecosystem that 2 centuries of digging had placed under sustained pressure. The island was designated a national park in 1978 and a UNESCO World Heritage Site shortly after, recognized primarily for its marine environment, which includes some of the highest concentrations of hammerhead sharks in the Pacific Ocean, alongside whale sharks, manta rays, and dolphins that gather in its surrounding waters year-round. The last expedition formally permitted for exploration connected to the treasure question was conducted by British researcher Sean Whitehead in 2012. His team had 10 days, ground-penetrating radar, and robotic equipment designed for subsurface scanning. They found no gold. If the treasure was ever found by any of the 300 expeditions or by any private party who chose not to report a discovery, no credible record of that finding exists in any public archive. The Costa Rican government has stated that it believes no treasure exists on the island. The Lima archive holds no entry for the Mary Deer. August Gissler died in New York City on August 8, 1935. He had left the island in 1908 and never returned. His tunnels outlasted him, cut into rock solid enough to resist the jungle that has reclaimed everything else his colony left behind. The tobacco fields are gone. The settlers' houses are gone. The Cocos Plantation Company is gone. The tunnels are still there. The 33 park rangers who live on the island today are its only residents. The first permanent population the island has had in the modern era. They are there to protect the ecosystem, not to search. Visitors arrive in limited numbers each year. Permitted only during the day, almost all of them diverse coming for the sharks. No one is allowed to stay overnight. No digging is permitted under any circumstances. In 2014, an art project titled Treasure of Lima, a buried exhibition, deliberately placed contemporary artworks beneath the island's soil, a conceptual gesture toward the legend, and one of the few things known with certainty to be buried on Cocos Island. The works are documented. Their location is recorded. The Costa Rican government administers them as part of the national park. That is the only confirmed buried treasure on the island, deliberately placed, precisely located, and not particularly valuable in gold. The legend, meanwhile, continues to circulate. The Costa Rican government receives requests for excavation permits regularly. The answer is consistently no. The island's marine ecosystem, the hammerhead schools that circle the seamounts offshore, the whale sharks that pass through on migration routes, is now the primary reason for its UNESCO designation, and that ecosystem has benefited from the end of systematic digging. The legend that drew 300 expeditions may, in that sense, have saved the island. The attention it brought eventually produced the protection the island needed. The question of what, if anything, is actually buried in those tunnels has no clean answer yet. And maybe the way this story has persisted for 2 centuries without one is itself the more interesting thing. If this kind of history stays with you, subscribing helps more of it find you. The Lima Archive holds records from 1820, port fees, cargo manifests, departure logs from the chaos of revolution. August Gissler left in 1908, 19 years, 6 coins. He never returned the tunnels he dug are still open today. The map still has no title.